Find your future by exploring your world. The Massachusetts School of Law challenges their students to explore the important issues of our time, learning from experts in fields like politics, sports, and business law. From first-hand accounts and dramatic reenactments, in-depth conversations with society's leaders, from historians to lawyers, from high-tech professionals to environmental experts. The Massachusetts School of Law at Andover presents mslaw.edu.
Hello and welcome to mslaw.edu. This show is produced by the Massachusetts School of Law at Andover. Please Can We Keep the Donkey features dozens of personal accounts of successful animal adoptions and animal rescues. These entertaining stories describe rewarding relationships with animals: dogs, cats, birds, a snake, a pony, and yes, of course, a donkey. What makes this book unique is the fact that here at the Massachusetts School of Law is a group of individuals gathered in a single building to study law, and yet they have a common willingness to help animals and various experiences of having done so. All the proceeds of this book are used to assist animals. People have different perception of lawyers and of the legal field. Animal lovers, animal activists are generally not one of them.
Last row on the left, against the wall, second cage from the end. He was the only dog not barking. I had a dog already and wasn't sure about adopting another, but I decided to go see him anyway. A coworker had asked earlier in the day, "Did you know there's a standard at the Centerville Animal Shelter?" I couldn't think about anything else for the rest of the day. The dog was emaciated to only 40 pounds and was listed as black. He had been brought in a couple of days earlier with a miniature schnauzer. Both had been severely neglected and abused. The animal control officer said they had been left outside year-round and had very little socialization. The schnauzer had already been adopted by a volunteer at the shelter. When I saw him, he had been given a bath, and it was obvious that he was gray, not black. I talked to him through the noise of the other dogs and the chain-link fence that separated us. He sat quietly and offered his paw. I was hooked.
Wonderful, Open. Tell us what happens.
Well, when I left the shelter that day, they told me that if I was interested, I'd be fourth on the list. Mm-hmm. And I was very disappointed. I thought
your heart sunk.
Yeah. Thought, well, if that many people are already interested in him, there's no way I'm gonna be able to get him. But I put my name on the list anyway. And the fact that I didn't have any children and that I already had a standard worked in my favor. Mm-hmm. They knew that I knew what it was to make that kind of a commitment to that kind of a dog. And so I called on the day after he had his surgery. He hadn't yet been neutered, and was told that I could have him. Wow. So I immediately jumped in the car with my checkbook. I even forgot my wallet that day. And I had my other dog with me because we had to make sure that we get along. And we drove down to the animal shelter, and everything went okay. The meeting was pretty cool between the two dogs. And we loaded him up and took him home. It was pretty obvious. His abuse was obvious when we got him home. Besides being very thin, and he was afraid of everything.
You say in your story he was even afraid of you.
Yeah. Every time you'd go to pet him or put your hand out, he would cower, go out down to the ground, and it was pretty obvious he'd never been on stairs. He was afraid of the stairs when he got in the house. Mm-hmm. We had a dog door. It was pretty obvious he'd never seen a dog door. So he took cues from my other dog, though, and I think that helped him a lot. She made him feel comfortable, and I often say he taught her how to be a dog, and she taught him how to be a poodle. And the rest is history, I guess.
What's her life? What is your two dogs' lives like today?
Well, they have free run of the house and the yard. They have a dog door. Everywhere we've lived, we've gotten a dog door, and they are. In the beginning, they were indifferent towards one another. She would keep him off the couch. She would stay on the couch and keep him off, and didn't like him. She would pull her feet in anytime he would pass by. And now they're inseparable. If one's in the other room, they always go and check on each other. they become distressed if they can't find each other. We had one. There was a short time when my female had to go into to the hospital, animal hospital, for overnight, and he was upset about that. Where's my sister?
Wow.
So they get along very well.
That's wonderful. Last thing I want to talk about, you're leaving the day that you adopted Jake.
Mm-hmm.
And as you're going out the door with Jake, a woman stops because her daughter wants to pet your
Right.
dog. Tell us that story.
Well, I'm filling out the paperwork and everything necessary to take the dog, and there's a little girl, and she said she goes towards my dog, and she goes to pet him, and the mom says, "Oh, don't pet that dog, he's ugly." And the little girl came back, and I thought he was. I guess I looked through other people's eyes for the first time because I saw something else, and I realized that he was very skinny and pretty rough looking at that point. He had never in his whole life been to a groomer. He'd probably had his first bath at the animal shelter there. So because he was black when they brought him in, and I just knew based on his temperament and the way he acted in the shelter that he would be the right dog for me. I mean, he wasn't barking. He was well behaved. He had the typical, mannerisms and similar to my other dog. And so I knew there was a dog underneath all that was. They're all that way, though.
Yes, they are. And you say today that when you're out walking your dogs, people stop now and say, "Oh, look at that beautiful dog."
Yeah.
And then when you tell them that Jake came from a shelter, they seem flabbergasted by that.
Yeah, they're often surprised. They say, "I've never seen a dog like that at the shelter," and I say, shelters are full of dogs like that.
Tony arrived in New Hampshire from an overcrowded shelter in Radford, Virginia on April 6th of 2003. He was found as a very young pup loose in the woods. Shelter workers assumed he was dumped there by someone who didn't want to care for him any longer. His new parents were waiting anxiously to meet him. The transporters had forewarned us at New England Dog Lift that Tony, a 12-week-old Labrador Retriever mixed pup, was not getting along with his companion Trey, an adult lab mix coming to New Hampshire from the same shelter. We assumed that it was a result of the stress of transport. We had no idea that this adorable little puppy would turn out to be the problem child that he was. What happened?
Well, there's a shelter in Radford, Virginia that's overcrowded on a regular basis, and we work with them. We transport the dogs from Radford, Virginia up to New Hampshire, place them in foster homes. Tony, I had received a picture actually of Tony from the shelter, adorable picture, and I said absolutely we can find him a home, shouldn't be a problem at all. And we posted him on Pet Finder and had applications immediately, people that wanted to adopt him. So the family that was set to adopt him was pre-approved by us and actually waiting for the transport. He was really the most adorable puppy that you'd ever see. Had no idea the problems that we were going to have with him. He was fear aggressive, and I think it was a result of him being, left in the woods, not being properly socialized, and he was quickly thrown out of his first home.
Tell the audience a little bit about the day you go to retrieve Tony when you get the call to, quote, come get him.
I was actually at work that day, and I got a call on my cell phone saying, we adopted Tony, you need to call me right away. So I called the new owner, and she said, you have to come get him. He's out of control. I just can't take it. So drove to Henniker, New Hampshire from Manchester, New Hampshire to go pick him up. When I got to the home, I walked in the house and I saw this little puppy running from one end of the house to the other. He literally jumped on the coffee table, jumped on the kitchen chairs, jumped on the kitchen table and down, and he just kept running around. And the adopter was watching him, it was almost a deer-struck look in her eyes as she was watching him. And as I'm watching him run through the house, I said, how long has he been doing this? And she said, since he got here. So she very, very quickly handed me his toys and his dog food and his crate and all of the special things they had bought to welcome him, and showed me the door. So off I went back to my house with Tony.
What happens from there?
Well, we tried 2 additional homes with Tony. The problem with Tony was he was fear aggressive, so he would be in his crate, and this is really what turned him off from the adopters. He would be in his crate, and he wouldn't come out because he was a little fearful still of people, and the people would reach in to pull him out, you know,
Yep.
with care, but all the same, he's backed into a crate. He's fearful, and he would growl and snarl, and I call it like the puppy Cujo look. And he was trying to bite people. So came to my house. I called my trainer and said, what am I going to do with this dog? So we did a lot of one-on-one training. I learned personally a lot about fear aggression, and we started working with him. And you know, he came around very quickly, but there was a lot. We put a lot of effort into it.
That was year 2003,
Yes, it was.
5 years ago. Where's Tony today?
Tony now has his CGC, which is his Canine Good Citizen. It's an American kennel, from the American Kennel Company, I believe it is, has a CGC, which is your Canine Good Citizen certification. So he's got a CGC. He's Delta certified as a therapy dog. So we go to the nursing home. He's been evaluated by the Delta Society, which is a national organization. And he's, you know, been approved. He goes to the nursing home, visits with the seniors. They adore him. I call him sort of my demo dog whenever we are doing demonstrations in public for, you know, our rescue organization. He goes with me and does tricks.
He does agility.
He does agility. We've done 2 years in a row. We've done a fundraiser for the Floating Children's Cancer Center in Boston, where we were paired up actually with a child cancer survivor, and actually our child did, you know, the agility route with him. So yeah, he's what I call our poster child for training. Really, he's an amazing dog now, and when I look back to 2003, it's unbelievable that he's come this far.
And he continues to reside in your home.
Oh, he does. Yeah.
Yeah.
After the 3rd failed home, you know, we'd take a few steps back every time we tried to place him, because the new home, you know, they essentially was if Tony would get away with things. I remember the last home telling me he jumped up on the couch, and when my husband asked him to get off, he growled at him, which, you know, was sort of Tony's, it became his mantra. And every time he succeeded at that, he would say, oh, this is great, this works great, and he would continue it. So, yeah, after the 3rd failed adoption, my son looked at me one day and said, Mom, this is just ridiculous, and he needs to stay.
Marion, we don't need another Goddard stray, echoed down the halls of the Goddard School of Science and Technology, as my father realized he had just lost another stray animal battle. She had been at work since 9:15 a.m. on the rainy Saturday and found a tiny, flea-infested, soaking wet kitten. She had heard his cries and had opened the side door of the Goddard school, only to have him run through her legs and take refuge in her office. What happens from there, Dan?
Well, at first, like you said, my dad was very hesitant to take him home, and after spending the day in the office with the cat and my parents, we decided we should take him home and not leave him in the school, just for the sake of keeping himself out of trouble, and to give him something, you know, to clean him up a little bit, and kind of take it from there, see where would we go. And it again, like you said, my dad lost another battle, and he ended up spending the night, and it turned into 2 days, turned into the trip to the vets to get the flea medicine, and we ended up getting him fixed, and that is the introduction of Seamus. That's how he fixed his place in the Guerra household, and he has never left since. So
Now, I have to say, I know you.
Yep.
You don't exaggerate. But, Dan, you're telling me that Seamus rides with you in the Jeep,
Yes.
paws on the steering wheel. Come on, Dan.
I kid you not. I kid you not. Be it a trip to CVS to pick up something, he's quite comical. He found his, actually the first time we took him was we took him in the car ride back home to to get cleaned up, and he wasn't too thrilled with the car ride. And then I took him to CVS just out of a whim. I thought, well, we'll see how he likes it. And he was in the lap, had his feet up on the top of the steering wheel, looking out, being my driver for myself. And he found his way up on the dashboard a couple of times. He loves it. He loves to be in command, and he's always got his eyes open to where he's going and to see everything around him. And his eyes are so big and blue and beautiful that he catches everything all around him. So he's got to see it all. He's got to see it all. So
now, I might have disbelieved this story.
Okay.
But the final story, you end your story in the book
yeah.
by talking about Seamus, who steals food, goes up on the counter, and passes it down to the dogs below. You know what? I didn't buy it. I didn't buy it, Dan. But then you produce pictures.
Yeah.
Tell me.
Well, at the time that the pictures were taken, our 2 golden retriever puppies were quite young, and they couldn't reach the counter. And even when they had their paws up, they couldn't get anywhere over to catch anything. And of course, Seamus has the ability to get up there and to mosey around and to see what he could get his hands on. And he apparently, I don't know how, I was in complete shock when I saw it, but he went to we had a pan of asparagus, and he jumped up on the counter and over the island and kind of meandered around his usual spot and to help you cook or whatever. And we left to go eat, and we realized there's something wrong. The dogs are not bothering us for the food. Something was dreadfully wrong. And my mother came out and, "You've got to be kidding me!" Dropping the asparagus to the dogs, and it was. It's one of those situations where there's nothing you could do but laugh, because it was that it was great though. It was something else. It was something to be seen. But
obviously, you've grown up in a household where animals are valued and rescued.
Absolutely.
And what was that like?
It was a big juxtaposition to at the beginning of the story, where we found him flea-ridden, completely soggy, and he came from the streets where he was put out because either they couldn't take care of him, they couldn't house him or whatnot, and we juxtapose that with, the 2 golden retrievers sleep in the bed with, my parents, or they take up the bed is the better way to put it, and Seamus will sleep at the foot of my bed or whatnot, and the animals have always been a part of us, and they are family members, and they ride with us. They go to the store with everything. We either have 2 dogs, or we've got a cat driving the Jeep. Either way, we've always got an animal at some point. But
sounds like my house, an out of control house. Okay,
yes.
I loved your story.
Structured chaos. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
As a young child, I was forced to go on Sunday drives with my family to various places in New England. It was normally torture until one Sunday when everything changed. Why did things change?
Well, they certainly did change, and I'm sure anybody that's been on family drives with their parents and siblings at young ages have been in the car, and it's an absolute chore sometimes. Sometimes it's not so much, but things changed when we stopped one time at a petting zoo, and it was kind of attached to a general store. Mm-hmm. And we were allowed to go play with the pets, and we went and discovered the pets, and my brother went off in one direction. I went towards the donkey because just hadn't really seen a donkey before, and went and had a handful of feed in my hand, and he saw that, and being a petting zoo animal, I'm sure he knew he was going to get fed, so he was a best friend at that point. He responded immediately, yes. So we would go back to the petting zoo 2-3 times every month or so, on the Sunday drives, and the donkey was still there. One time we went to the petting zoo and the store was going out of business. Originally, when we saw the going out of business, the pets were for sale as well. And all the pets, every week we would go, the pets would disappear little by slow. The donkey, he remained. The owner had an idea that he would put a sign over the donkey with a price on it. And the price was, I think at first it was $400, $250, crossed off. It eventually said free, and we'd kind of grown attached to him by that point. So we had a dilemma on our hands.
And you write in the book,
yes,
free meant trouble for your parents.
Yes, it certainly did.
Okay, so what happens?
Well, my father had just built a big barn. We had plenty of land in our residence in Sterling, and he didn't know what to do with the barn. He was going to restore a car in it, and we kind of decided that a donkey might be a better fit than a car for the barn. So it took weeks of persuading, but we kind of wore down our parents a little bit.
And he finally says, does he not, we'll take him.
Yes.
Dad says we'll take him.
He did.
And I'm told that you threw a temper tantrum of still unconfirmed proportions.
And they will remain unconfirmed.
And so tell me now, Chester comes home to live with the Harrington family.
Yes.
What's life like?
He lived in the barn. He had plenty of room. He lived downstairs. It was cool in the summertime. It was warm in the winter. We had a heater for him. He had a big pen. We could tie him up basically anywhere in the yard, front yard, backyard. I mentioned in the story at Christmas time we'd dress him up, throw the Christmas decorations all over him, and neighbors would stop, take pictures, and it was a really life-changing experience.
I wonder if you would, for the audience, read the close of the story. What happens to Chester?
Our family had Chester for close to 14 years before he passed away. His passing was a few years back, but every time I go into my hometown today and run across people from the old neighborhood, they always want to remind me of a funny story about Chester. The consensus favorite is the time he got loose from his rope and ran all the way down to the center of town, about a mile away, where he fell in love with the granite statue commemorating Mary Had a Little Lamb, from the poem Mary Had a Little Lamb, which is a true story that happened in Sterling, Massachusetts. After a call from a neighbor who recognized Chester, I went to get him and walk him home. Walking home that day with my ass in tow on a short leash and the people slowing their cars to laugh and take pictures of the situation, I realized three things. Donkeys run fast, animals make people feel good, and furthermore bring out the good in people. And it was awesome growing up with the cutest ass in town.
Earning a law degree shouldn't burden you with overwhelming debt. At Massachusetts School of Law at Andover, we believe it should be affordable, achievable, and yes, even an enjoyable first step to your successful career. We believe in an atmosphere of support, flexible class scheduling, and hiring professors with real-world experience, ensuring you leave law school with the professional skills you need. We are the most affordable law school in New England, and we believe in you.
The Massachusetts School of Law. Your future starts here.
It was dusk. I was 10 hours into a 12-hour shift and tired from a long day of what seemed like constant calls for service. I was tied up on a motor vehicle stop, so the call went to Officer Jones. Tell us about Officer Jones.
Well, of course, the names have been changed to protect the innocent, but Officer Jones is a big, husky man. He's a all-around cop's cop. He's the guy that you would definitely want to be your backup if anything ever went wrong. And he's just tough as nails and
intimidating.
Very, very much
Okay.
so, even to other policemen. But he does have a weakness, like to Superman's kryptonite. He just hates snakes for whatever reason. I don't know, maybe something in his childhood. But if there was a snake on the ground, he would find a way to go around it, and just didn't like him. So this particular call caught my interest while I was on this motor vehicle stop. We get a lot of animal complaints, and loose dogs, even loose cattle, stuff like that. But when she said snake, I knew that Officer Jones probably wasn't the right man for this particular call.
Okay, so you responded to the call?
I did. I wrapped up what I was doing because I figured he's going to need some help.
Yeah.
So I headed in that direction, and I was kind of hoping that I'd get there first just to avoid any kind of trouble, but I didn't. He was already there, and he had sent something over the radio. When I on my way, I picked up the radio and I said, "Do you want me to respond? I'll give you a hand." And he said, "No, this is nothing that a little bit of buckshot isn't going to handle." Buckshot, of course, is a type of ammunition for a shotgun. So I knew there was going to be violence if I didn't get there first.
Yep.
So I hurried along, and I did manage to get there. Just as I came up, he was pointing at something on the ground with a Remington shotgun, and he was shaking. it was kind of funny. And in my mind, I thought maybe he was hesitating or something. We later found out that he didn't take the safety off, so he was struggling against
So he
the
was
trigger.
trying to shoot, but it wouldn't activate.
Exactly.
Okay.
And it was frustrating him to no end. But it delayed him long enough that I could get there and say, "Hey, why don't you put that down, and maybe there's another way to do this. And of course he got angry a little bit, frustrated more, but he did let me give it a try. We put the gun safely away, and I approached this animal, which when the call came over, the woman that reported it, of course, she said it was a 12-foot python. It was tearing up her garden. And it was a 4-foot boa constrictor, and it was clearly somebody's pet. Either it had been released, which happens sometimes. People get too big and they can't take care of them anymore, so they let them go, which is terrible for these types of animals because they won't survive the winter here in New England.
Right.
And then sometimes they do escape. They're pretty clever too.
Yeah.
There's a way out, they'll figure it. Well, this guy was in a garden where it didn't belong, and the attention it was getting was causing it to be to become absolutely terrified. It was in a defensive position. I'm doing a lot with my hands, but snakes don't have feet or hands. They can't claw, kick, or scratch. The only thing they could do is bite. So she was trying to bite everybody and everything that was within range. So it was kind of tricky. I asked the homeowner to get me a pillowcase,
Right.
And she did. And I held the pillowcase in one hand, and with the other hand, I kind of jiggled this hand so that it got her attention. And just at the right moment, I got it by the back of the head, put her in the pillowcase, and scooped it up, and off we went, which was great because it elicited applause from the people that had gathered to see this.
Not your average traffic stop in the neighborhood,
No, it
is
was
it?
very different. Well, Officer Jones was excited too because he thought that we were going to take the bag off into the sand pit where he could shoot the helpless animal. And of course, that's not what happened. I put an ad in the paper to whoever lost the pet, contact the police department, you'll get it back. And it never did get the call. So in the meantime, I had taken it home. And of course, I assured my wife it was just for a couple of days till the owner, I'm sure, is looking for her.
Famous last words. Dear, only here for a day or two.
Right. Well, she's, instead of 4 feet, she's close to 8 feet now.
Wow.
And I've had her for, I think, 6 years approximately. And she's a great pet.
How do you keep her?
She's, there's an entire attic has been renovated for reptiles. It's heated specifically. I put in skylights for sunlight. And she has a handcrafted enclosure that I made myself. And that's it. She lives in this, it's a box made out of plexiglass and lumber. She's got a feeding dish and a hide box that I made out of cardboard. And that's really all she needs. She'll be in the hide box at night and comes out in the day to sit in the sun. And every couple of days I'll come up and take her out and we'll sit together upstairs. And it's great. She's just has a really good life. And incidentally, she's never, ever tried to bite me or any member of my family. There was an incident with the neighbor's dog when I had her in the backyard, but I think that was a defensive thing because the neighbor's dog came over to see what was going on, and she didn't like that.
She didn't want any part of that.
No, that was bad news.
It was the end of August 2005 when the United States witnessed another disaster. Hurricane Katrina swept into Louisiana. My family and I were glued to the television as we watched a whole state disappear underwater. Our hearts went to the victims who had lost everything in a matter of hours. We wanted to help in some way. We saw these beautiful, selfless animals being lost in the flood without their families to comfort them. Caroline, what did you and your family do?
It's interesting. A friend of my mother's told her that there's an organization where they're trying to rescue as much animals as possible. And my parents got really interested in this, and they contacted the organization. And unfortunately, Happy now just was without a family, and they made all the arrangements, and that's how we got him.
What a wonderful thing to do.
It was really nice. We wish we could have helped more animals. It was really sad.
50,000, as I understand, or something
Yeah.
like that number perished.
Yeah.
Just so sad. Tell me about Happy. How did you choose the name Happy?
When we got him, it's funny, being under that tragedy, you would think he would be depressed or maybe not as comfortable with the family. And it was complete opposite. It's like he's known us for years. And vice versa. We've had previous dogs, but we didn't have a bond as much as with Happy. So you could just tell by his face, he's just always happy, want to play, and we just named him Happy.
Now, Please tell me he's not wearing a Yankees uniform,
Oh,
Caroline.
yes, he is. I'm a New Yorker at heart.
This is
so
Boston, Caroline.
I could change it, but he's a Yankee boy in New York, so he's our special Yankee dog.
The summer prior to Christopher's first year in college, he woke me with the news. Remember growing up, you never let me have Man's best friend? Well, I bought a dog. My reaction was shock, dismay, and anger. I asked what he proposed doing with this dog in the fall. You're going away to school. You can't leave a dog home with me. I travel for business. Who's going to take care of the dog? I can't. I suppose that you think I'm going to hire someone to take care of this animal. When the conversation was over, I was not happy. But then he knew I would not be pleased. Each time Christopher tried this, the animal went back. During each call from overseas, Christopher's sales campaign continued. The dog was small, 2 pounds, just a puppy. He'll never get bigger than 3 or 4 pounds. The dog is healthy. I went to a professional breeder to buy the dog. You will love Cheech. What happens, Denise? Does the dog go back? I don't think so.
The dog never went back. I had no alternative. Cheech was going to stay. In fact, he went off to school with Christopher, spent 4 years in college with Chris. I had to find an apartment because most dorms will not allow
Right.
pets. So I had to find, not Christopher, an apartment so he and the dog could go to school together.
And that wasn't easy.
It was not easy. It was very difficult.
Okay, so your son and the dog, who, by the way, you fall in love with, don't you?
I did.
Head off to school.
Head off to school after negotiating with the landlord to include a cat-sized dog into the lease, because I had read the lease and realized that cats were okay. So I said, well, what would be wrong with a little 2-pound dog, a cat-sized dog? So that's what he wrote into the lease, a cat-sized dog. The boys went off to school, and they would come home on the weekends or school vacation, and I fell in love with the dog. I was the one that bathed it, but unfortunately, Cheech got sick, and it was probably one of the most devastating things in Christopher's life, as well as in mine, because I had become very close to the dog.
And ultimately you're overseas, as I recall, and you get a telephone call that the dog is at the vet's and the prognosis is not good.
Prognosis is not good, 50% chance, which surprised me because I thought he was just, I thought he had just had the flu. I didn't think he was really that sick. And the vet said to me, we either want to do a spinal tap or we would like to do an MRI. Of course, they told me an MRI was going to be $2,600, and I suggested, how about treating him clinically first to see if perhaps that was the issue or the spinal tap. And they said they didn't want to do that because he was so little. So we did what I thought was going to be a clinical approach for only about an hour when I got the call that he had passed away.
Devastating to your son.
Devastating. My thought more was, how is Chris going to handle this, because he was so close to the dog. So I never let him have a dog. And then there was no choice. I mean, he was going to stay. And when he did, the two became so close. I had never seen my son quite the way he was when I got there after I flew home to deal with the dog.
Will there be dogs in your son in your future?
Well, definitely in his. I'm hoping that he will get one so I vicariously can live and have another animal through him. It's very difficult for me because of the way I work and I travel all the time. But for someone who never wanted a dog, I was devastated when that little dog died.
My name is Mary, and I'm addicted to cats. Specifically, I'm a softie, and I currently have 5 rescued cats living at my house. Until last year and the death of my oldest cat, Gracie, I had 6. However, it is the cat that got away that often haunts me, the one that I failed to rescue.
When I was young, I had, my parents had 2 dachshunds, but I always wanted a cat. I mean, I can remember asking my mom for a kitten. I wanted a kitten. As soon as I learned how to talk, I wanted a kitten. My dad said no, no. And finally, my mom saw an ad in the newspaper for a tortoiseshell cat at the Humane Society, and the ad specifically said that she had to be an only cat. So she went to my dad and said, why don't we go adopt this tortoiseshell cat? It says only 1 cat, so we would have, a stopping point. And my dad finally, at this point, after, this was when I was in 3rd grade, so, about 8 years of saying no.
Yeah, I did that with my son for a number of years too.
He caved in, and so we loaded up in our family car and went to the Humane Society and to adopt this cat. And we got her in the car, and I was holding her in the back seat, but it was a 2-door car. And we got home, and I was trying to get out of the car with the cat, and she jumped out of my arms and ran off. And it was, a horrible experience. We looked all over, we had the neighbors looking, we never found her, and I've always wondered what happened, to her, and felt very guilty about it. But after that, my mom, I was so incredibly upset that my mom, tried to find another cat for us. So our veterinarian had a couple of stray cats who had a litter of kittens. So she called over, and she had called over there, and she took my brother and I to pick out 2 kittens. So now we went from the 1 to 2. And when we got there, we looked at the kittens, but I noticed this other cat, in a cage by himself, and he was playing with my hair. I had really long blonde hair at that point in time, and I said, "Mom, no, I don't want a kitten. I want this cat," and that was Smokey. So he became, kind of my first cat that was mine, and my brother also picked out a kitten.
So now we've got 3 cats?
2.
Okay.
Just 2. Just 2. But it didn't take long for us to get a third one. And when I was in 5th grade, I was, helping out, doing my classroom errand. I had to go to the cafeteria for something, and there was a little kitten outside the cafeteria yowling to get in. It was a very cold day. And so I scooped him up, and I went to the main office, and I called my dad, and I said, "Dad, there's this little kitten. Can I bring him home?" And, my dad, he was really a big softie, said yes. So that was our 3rd. Then we picked up a 4th from the neighborhood.
And the 2 dogs still?
Yes. And then we picked up, at this, 2 more who were 2 kittens that my dad actually found in our yard and brought in. So at that point we had 5 at our house. No, actually that would have been 6,
Yeah.
the last 2, so 6. And my dad actually still has one of the cats that I had growing up, who's now over 20 years old.
Wow. You don't expect cats to live that long.
No.
Now, you yourself engage in humane efforts now by fostering many cats as well, right?
Yes, I have right now 4 cats of my own at my house. Unfortunately, I lost one cat actually this past weekend on Sunday to cancer, which I think is one of the hardest parts of being a pet owner, is that, having to say goodbye and make that decision on behalf of your pets. So it was a sad weekend. But in addition to the 4 cats that I have, I've volunteered for the Merrimack River Feline Rescue Society, and they adopt cats out of both a shelter in Salisbury, Massachusetts, and out of the PetSmart in Danvers. So before my daughter was born, I went once or twice a week to help take care of the cats at the PetSmart in Danvers. And I also fostered cats who were either kittens who were too young to be adopted out yet, or who were feral and needed some extra attention in order to be comfortable with people to be adopted, or older cats who were not adjusting well to being in the shelter until they could find a more permanent arrangement for those cats.
So now, when you take a cat in, generally how long does the cat stay before it moves on to their next home?
It really depends on the cat and the situation. When I've had feral cats, the feral kittens stay until they're friendly. I mean, I've had cats for several months because it takes that long to get them to not be afraid of people. And you can't put a cat in a PetSmart environment that's going to hiss at or bite somebody. So you have to get the cat to the point of enjoying being petted and not being afraid of people.
Now, a feral cat is born to a wild cat and is born in the wild?
A feral cat is born to a wild cat born in the wild. So they haven't had contact with people. And so they have the natural fear of people, as opposed to cats. I've also fostered pregnant mothers who come in pregnant, and they, even if they're friendly, they would come to a foster house to have their kittens until the kittens get old enough to go. And in those situations, the kittens can be adopted as soon as they're big enough to be spayed and neutered. Almost all rescue groups now.
How long is that, generally?
It's by weight, so you've got to wait till the kitten is at least 2 pounds, so it depends on how healthy the kittens are when they're born, but 8 to 12 weeks.
Well, we had kittens when we were little like that, and it was always a great experience to have the little kittens in the house and see the whole
It's
process.
a lot of fun, and just to watch them, you see them being born up till, and to become what we think of as kittens, and then to see them get adopted into good homes, and the mothers as well, rather than, the alternative, what the alternative would have been for them. It's a really good feeling.
From day one, I knew I took the right step.
The Massachusetts School of Law is challenging,
but you feel welcomed and supported at every turn.
You're learning the professional skills you need to get hired.
From professors with real-world experience.
Trust me, that makes a huge difference.
I now have a job I love, and the best part is, I'm not in debt.
No LSATs required. Teachers that make a difference at the most affordable law school in New England, the Massachusetts School of Law. Your future starts here.
During the early hours of one cold December morning, I was dispatched to a rural part of the municipality to investigate a motor vehicle accident. The accident occurred in the eastbound lane of Marginal Road, a poorly lit and densely wooded part of town. While en route, I learned that the accident involved a vehicle which had collided with a deer. While this is not an uncommon occurrence, particularly on this stretch of roadway, I soon realized that this incident was far from the routine accident I was accustomed to handling. Tell us what follows on this December morning, Robert.
Okay, well, as the first paragraph indicated, at the time I was a police officer dispatched to that area, and it's not an uncommon occurrence. The driver of the vehicle that struck the deer, he's the one who brought it to my attention that the deer was pregnant. I was completely unfamiliar with, that myself, but at that point, consciously you cannot walk away.
The deer was dying, was it
yes.
not? Yes.
The mother deer is in the road, and more often than not, there's little or no chance of survival. And before taking matters into my own hands, we would contact local veterinarians to see if they can render assistance. Given the time of day or time of the morning, our efforts failed on that. Then we resorted to calling an organization called the Popcorn Park Zoo. They're an organization that will take in injured wildlife, nurse them back to health, and either keep them in the zoo or release them back into their natural habitat. We did make contact, but they were some distance away, and they cannot immediately respond. So at that point, essentially, the only way or the only chance of these deer have for survival is to perform a C-section.
And that's what you did.
And that's exactly what I did.
So in the middle of the highway, you used whatever tools you had in your bag, and you saved the life of the baby doe.
Yes, we carry a vast array of medical equipment for emergencies with people, and we just employ that in that situation. And by that time, the Popcorn Park Zoo had arrived and took custody of the deer.
Kate, you read Robert's story, you read the entire book, and you commented to me that Section 3 was among your favorite parts. Why?
I've always been a question authority type of person, and I was raised to believe that one of the worst crimes you can commit against yourself is to take somebody's word for it just because they say it's true. And police officers have a lot of authority, and I always thought of them as just coming to take my friends away. So it was good to change my opinion and my prejudices on what police actually do as part of their job.
You mentioned that Section 3, which is entitled, "You Have the Right to Remain Kind," and it details on-the-job rescues by Massachusetts School of Law students who are police officers. And in your classes, I'm sure you sit among many police officers, as we have several here in the school. And so your view of the police officers that sit in your class has changed as a result of reading the book.
That's correct.
And that's in a positive way.
That is in a positive way. I think anytime we can question the way that we previously thought, it's a good thing.
Pets, and specifically dogs, have for as long as I can remember been an integral component of my family. In fact, I would argue that one cannot define my family without including our dogs. This genuine connection to and deep appreciation for our dogs was instilled in my siblings and me at a very early age by my parents. Among the many important principles that my parents imparted to us were the value of caring for animals and the uniqueness of the reciprocal relationship that is at the heart of being a dog owner.
Really, a lot of the inspiration and everything came from my mom. Even when we were little, she always took in any type of animal that needed to be, either rehabilitated or was injured or we needed to take it to the vet. So it really started with my mom.
And she would just take the animals in from time to time?
She would, yeah. Or someone would call her. She also got involved with the Schnauzer League of Atlanta. And so then she would take in,
I have a Schnauzer too, you know.
You do?
No, that's him there.
That's Sarge?
Yep.
Oh, I didn't know that. So my little Schnauzer the one that I personally rescued is Wheezy Lou, right there, the one that I'm holding. And she's my little baby. I rescued her because I went to Petland, which is this terrible, I guess in Atlanta we have these pet stores. I don't know how many they have up here, if they even have any. And I go and I would look at these dogs and it was horrifying. And so I saw a lady in the parking lot that was leaving with like 3 Schnauzers. And I was like, oh my gosh. And she had all this medicine in her hand. And I was like, are these puppies sick? She's like, so it was this lady, Cynthia Biggs, and she made it her passion to go into all these pet stores. And basically, I mean, hers was, just in particular Schnauzers. But so she would go into all these pet stores and rescue every Schnauzer that they had. And so she was leaving. She was like, actually, I started a Schnauzer rescue out of my home. And so she would, buy the medicine, take them to her own vet. And she was like, would you like to come home and see the Schnauzers that I rescued? And I was like, of course, even though we had like 7 at home. And so I went to her house and I picked out Wheezy Lou. And I noticed Wheezy Lou from the get-go was very, very lethargic. And she just always slept. And I was like, there's something wrong with this. But I went ahead and I took her anyways because I felt I could do something for her. And I ended up taking her to the vet, and she kept on coughing and coughing and coughing, and I was like, there's something wrong with her. So they did more x-rays, and they found that she has bronchial pneumonia, where she had a bunch of mucus that completely encapsulated her lungs. And so they didn't know, and she was so young that they didn't know if there was any procedures that they could do without killing her. So I ended up then, they didn't have, I guess, the technology, if you will, at the local vet. So I had to take her to a 24/7 veterinary care hospital, and that's when they put her in an incubator.
They have incubator for little dogs?
They do. And so they had to, it was all controlled, a little controlled air, looks like a little baby incubator, I guess. And so then it was all pure air that she was breathing, and it was a controlled environment and at a perfect temperature, I guess, if you will. And so then they got to do one procedure where they could test the bacteria that was in her. And once they targeted that bacteria, then they could get the medicine that would then, be able to cure her. Mm-hmm. And so they finally did that, and then I had to give her, so that was after, though, a week of her being in the 24/7 care. And now, mind you, this is medical bills, right. And they require a 50% minimum. So pretty much maxed out a good credit card on that one. That was even just the 50%.
And you're a student at the time.
I am a student, and lo and behold, my dad was out of town, and no one really knew what I was up to, which I don't know, I guess was not funny when the credit card bill came in, but seeing that Wheezy Lou was healthy after this 2-week stint. So then she was in the incubator for 7 days, and they were able to get her healthy enough where I could take her home. But then the medicine, the procedures that I would have to do on her, I had to inject shots into her back between her shoulder blades, once in the morning, once at night, and basically it was like a steroid that would let her, grow and become healthier. So that was Wheezy Lou.
So,
she's my baby.
So was writing her story a labor of love then?
It was. I mean, I could stop a stranger on the street and talk to them for 20 hours or about Wheezy Lou. So it was really, as I said earlier, it was just really easy. It was, and it was so fun because it was fun, I guess you could say, because even though it was terrible going through it, and we didn't know the vet on staff I was dealing with was like, to be honest, we really don't even know if she's going to live. So you are taking a risk of putting down all this money on this little dog that wasn't even 3 pounds. She literally was like this big. It's a risk, and I was like, well, I think she's worth it. I really did. I don't know why. I just took the risk on Wheezy Lou, and and I think that's why I think it was a great story and easier for me to write about because it wasn't a tragic end. Where now we see her and she's crazy. You know what schnauzers are. They love to just talk to you. She's always barking, always has something to say. So yeah, it was really fun. It definitely was a labor of love.
What's your advice to other people about taking both the financial and the emotional risk to get invested with a rescue dog like this?
I think it's not even, for me, well, personally, it's not even a choice. I just would do it regardless, and then you kind of deal with the repercussions after. For me, it's really a passion. It's something inside me that is nothing I can really articulate. It's just, I think it's, if anything, a impulse. It's a reaction that automatically I see anything in need in it, or anything that's sick or injured or wounded, and it's, forget about it. My whole world shuts down, and I just go after that animal and try to save it.
Tell us about Gregory Peck.
You mean the great actor?
Well, no, not really. Your first bird.
Oh, the first bird. Actually, my first and only bird. Gregory Peck was a baby blue-fronted Amazon that I probably owned about 25 years ago. And I owned him with a girlfriend at the time, and he was our baby.
What is life like living with a bird?
It can be quite a distraction. It's a whole lot more work than I ever imagined, but Gregory Peck was also a lot of fun. Some of the things that we taught him to say were quite humorous and got us into trouble at times.
Give me an example.
I can give you 3.
All right.
Hey, your pants are on fire! Give me a peanut or I'll slap your face.
Oh,
and
God.
my favorite of all time, when you touch me, oh baby, you know what I like. And he'd have that little warble in his voice.
Oh, no, Kurt. All right, now my next question, if I can gather my composure
Please,
here, is
yes.
tell me about Gregory's great escape and then your grand rescue.
Okay, Gregory was prone to flying around the house. We had a cathedral ceiling, and every once in a while we'd let him out of the cage because obviously he didn't like to be in there. And one day he was flying around the cathedral ceiling, and my girlfriend opened the front door because there was a knock on the door, and when she opened up the door, didn't realize how close Gregory was to the front door, and he flew out. Later, soon after that, I received a telephone call from her saying, she was frantic, saying, Gregory's gone, where is he? And I said, don't worry about it, I'll try to find her. So soon after that, I got another telephone call from somebody who said that they'd heard on the police radio that a bird had been sighted in front of the local movie theater. And so I ran across the street, which was nearby to my work, luckily, and there was Gregory on the ground in front of the movie theater, I think trying to get a ticket because listed on the movie theater marquee was Birdman of Alcatraz.
No, sir.
Honestly.
Oh, wow. Okay, so that was your early adventures with Gregory. Now,
yes.
Tell us a little bit about your life now with the farm, the menagerie. And the like.
I live in a farm in northern New Hampshire, actually a little bit north of Concord, New Hampshire, where we have the menagerie, as you say. I've got 4 children, and all of them have at least one pet. There are 3 dogs, a 140-pound Labrador Retriever, and an 8-pound Chihuahua, so that's quite the mix. And then there's a shepherd who's just about a year and a half old. She's a beautiful German shepherd, actually with East German lineage. I guess they're supposed to be the best shepherds. But then there's also a horse, a pony, a gecko lizard, 9 guinea pigs, a bunny, and the various other creatures that live on the farm. I like to sort of interest my children in wildlife, so it's a great place for that.
A wonderful, wonderful story, and quite a way to grow up. Now, did you grow up with dogs and animals as a kid?
I did, yeah. Actually, I had. We've always had at least one lab in the house. My mother has always loved labs, and so I started with one when I was a baby, and I've had one for as long as I've been alive, basically, at least one.
Holly, what was your motivation in getting involved with editing and writing these stories for Please Can We Keep the Donkey?
Diane. Diane approached me with the idea, and I thought it was a very good one, and editing, I do editing anyway, and I love it, so I'm combining 2 of my loves, writing, editing, with animals, so it was a perfect fit, no-brainer.
You know, some people would say, geez, rescuing a dog with the baggage that they may bring, that's a much harder thing to do and maybe too much trouble, as opposed to just finding one from a good breeder where you know is healthy as a puppy and just move through the process. Why engage in the rescue effort?
Because there's so many unwanted animals out there that it really helps. If you walk through a shelter and you see them all, you can't help but want to bring one home because they're just sitting there wanting to be loved. You're right about the baggage. This is my second rescue dog, and the first one, unfortunately, didn't get us along so well with my son. So we found a good home for him from the people we had fostered him from. But it's, as you know, you have one too, it's very rewarding when you can give an animal love like that. When breeders are going to sell their dogs, they're going to get sold, they're going to get homes anyway. These are the dogs that won't get homes, so that's why you take on the extra baggage.
Now, when the rescue effort isn't successful, it isn't a healthy match, because I know even Diane was worried about matching her dogs at one point. What is the process that's involved with trying to make sure you can find a more suitable placement after the first placement has failed?
Well, that's a good question, because the responsible people will take every step to make sure it doesn't go back to a shelter.
Right.
And we absolutely refused to bring it back to a shelter, so we were fortunate that we have a dog network of people, and we, asked around and said, would you be willing to take him? Unfortunately he was a biter, and with a toddler that didn't work out. But a lot of people...
With anyone, that doesn't work out that much.
It's true. I could take it if he bit me, though. So we just, we found a good home for him, but most people would probably just bring him back to the shelter.
And so you were able to find another placement, and it was a much better fit because of the lack of children in the home.
Right, no children, about 7 acres, other dogs, and people dedicated to raising dogs, so it worked out very, very well.
What are your favorite stories in the book?
It's hard to pick just one, but I think the donkey one is terrific, the lead story. Yep. I really liked it. The sad one was about Bud.
Yep.
And I really like that one a lot, even though, it brings tears to your eyes when you read it. I liked the Puff Puff one. Puff Puff, the dog who thinks he's a dachshund. There were several.
There are really a number of great stories in the book, and it's really a tribute to the ability you have as an editor to try and really pull them all together and make them a little more readable. So I congratulate you in that effort. How much time is involved in the whole process when you start to think about it? I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of other people saying, I've got a story about my pet that someone might want to read.
That was the hardest part, trying to, making the cuts, because some people submitted stories and they just weren't going to fit into the book, or the story wasn't good enough to tell. So that was the most disappointing part for me, is trying to, fortunately Diane was the one who had to tell the people, so I just had to tell Diane, oh, this one doesn't fit. A lot of time, because first you have to read them for content to see if they're fit in the book, then you read them a second time for editing purposes. I don't know how many hours it took, but it was all last summer. I spent all of last summer doing it.
Now, when the project then is done, is there a great deal of satisfaction in not just having a great book that's readable, but to know that the proceeds will be used to help benefit other animals as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's the first thing I tell people about the book. I'm not getting anything from this.
Yeah, none of us are.
This is going to a fund, so that makes it more enjoyable to tell people about it, because I don't know if I would have if it were just something I wrote.
So there you have it, Future Lawyers with Heart. We are proud to be producing future lawyers with a compassion and a concern for other beings. If you'd like to purchase a copy of Please Can We Keep the Donkey, and I sure hope you do, send a check or a money order for $25 to The Shadow Fund NE, stands for New England, 500 Federal Street, Andover, Mass. 01810. And thanks for doing so. So until next time, you be well.